Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our May 2025 webinar that's being hosted by the Iowa Secretary of State's Office and the Iowa Bankers Association, spotting social media scams, cyber fraud, and more. My name is Ashley Merkley, and I'm the Business Services Outreach Specialist here at the Iowa Secretary of State's Office. This webinar is being recorded, but your name and details are hidden from other participants. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, about 10 to 15 minutes to the end of the webinar. So feel free to please put your questions in the box that's labeled Q&A, but just make sure to use that box because you won't be able to really access the chat to type in there. We're also going to be sharing some resources, and there will also be a poll as well before we kick off our presentation here. So make sure to go ahead and participate in that. And we appreciate your time. And thank you again for joining us. And we appreciate Jenica and Chris's time as well. Now I'm going to give it to Secretary Pate to say some remarks, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate. I want to thank you for joining us for the webinar with the Iowa Bankers Association about combating business fraud. We're excited to support the Iowa Bankers Association in their anti-fraud awareness campaign. We hope you leave today's webinar with actionable tips on how to spot and prevent fraud from impacting you and your business. As Iowa's business portal, our office values connecting with the business community to help you receive resources that will enable you to run successful and efficient businesses. Today's webinar will cover common social media scams and fraud, other types of cyber fraud, and the impact of artificial intelligence and deep fake media. The Federal Trade Commission reported that there was a significant increase in financial losses from social media scams last year, and with consumers experiencing a total of $1.9 billion in losses. Additionally, according to the FTC, people reported losing money more often when they were contacted through social media. It's clear that these issues are common and growing. It's vital to have these conversations so we can learn how to be proactive and better defend ourselves. I invite you to look out for the future webinars on a range of business-related topics and follow our Biz Schemes SOS social media campaign as we continue to discuss business fraud and how to prevent it. Thank you to our presenters from the IBA for presenting this important information, and thank you again to all of you for joining us today.
All right, thank you, Secretary Pate, for those remarks. And now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters. So Chris Marchese is the Senior Security and Compliance Coordinator for the Iowa Bankers Association. He has been with the association for over 7 years, is a certified project manager, an inventor and U.S. patent holder, and has over a decade of experience in IT. Previously, Chris worked at the National Defense University in Washington. He retired from the Army National Guard after over 20 years of service, including receipt of the Bronze Star Medal during his last deployment to Afghanistan. Chris is a loving husband and father of 2 boys and 2 dogs. Jenica Lensmeyer is the Vice President of Marketing and Industry Relations at the Iowa Bankers Association. Prior to her current role, she spent over a decade in association advocacy and government relations. She is passionate about finding effective ways to influence leaders and telling the story of Iowa's banking industry. Lensmeyer has been with the Iowa Bankers Association for over 8 years. She is a graduate of Iowa State University and holds a master's in public administration from Drake University. She serves on the Innovate to Motivate Advisory Committee, representing the nation's most experienced corporate and association public affairs professionals. Lensmeyer grew up in Westside, Iowa, and is passionate about economic development in rural communities. In addition to her career involvement, she enjoys spending time with her husband, Brandon, and their 3 children. She's an active community volunteer and currently serves on the board of both Variety, the Children's Charity of Iowa, and Junior Achievement of Central Iowa. Thank you again. We appreciate all of you joining us, and we're going to kick it off with a poll, but first I'll let Chris and Jenica speak if they would like to.
Jenica, take it away.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Spotting Social Media Scams, Cyber Fraud, and More. We're going to really dive into the cyber fraud scene today, talk about some trends, how AI is influencing the sophistication of fraud and the different types of scams, and then provide you with some resources that you can use both personally and with your businesses. So we're going to start off with a poll. So Ashley, if you want to go ahead and get started with that, and then we will go from there.
Yep. Thank you, Jenica. And yeah, everyone, you should see that on your screen. So go ahead and feel free to take a second there and answer, and then we'll share the results on the screen for a bit as well.
My goodness. I was going to say the results are both depressing and not surprising, unfortunately.
Okay, well, I would say based on the results of the poll, 85% of those on this webinar have been either a victim of fraud or cybercrime or know someone that has been. And so, like I mentioned before, fraud really does impact everyone. It doesn't matter if you have a strong education. It doesn't matter if you're old, if you're young. Um, the fraudsters have become very sophisticated. And if you are in that 85% who has been a victim of fraud, you should not feel bad about that. It can be very difficult to detect if it is indeed a scam or not. And so our goal today is to educate you and to try to share with you some resources that can protect you from being a victim in the future and also protect your businesses and customers as well. All right. So we will go ahead and get started here. Okay, Chris, can you see my presentation okay?
Perfect, Jenica.
All right. So we will jump right in. So as the Secretary of State mentioned, the Federal Trade Commission has put out some data on the fraud losses. And last year in the US, fraud losses topped $23.7 billion, though some estimate that number could be as high as $158 billion. So those are reported fraud losses. We all know that a lot of these losses go unreported. And so a very high number regardless. And like I mentioned before, fraud does happen to everyone. It can happen to any person, any business. So you should always be aware. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. But be aware, stay alert, and educate yourself and those around you. So we'll jump right into fraud trends and types of fraud. So we all know that fraud goes well beyond the cyber sphere, I'll call it. It goes beyond social media, it goes beyond text messaging. But all of these tools that we use in our everyday lives, whether that's email, your mobile device, your social media, the internet, they're all wonderful, but they also open up a whole avenue of sophistication and fraud that you need to be aware of to protect yourselves and your family. So we'll jump in on some of the most popular trending types of fraud. So phishing scams, these are one of the highest vulnerabilities. And so one to be aware of in both your business lives and your professional or your personal life. Scammers use deceptive links to trick you into sharing personal information or installing malware. So if you work in a business environment or corporate environment, it is likely that your IT department runs phishing tests to be sure that you're paying attention and watching for phishing scams. So this is something to definitely be aware of, and we'll jump into this a little more as we go further. Romance scams. So we all hear about this. Using online dating apps and social media to build relationships, and then they get to the point where they ask for money and personal information. It's easy to say, oh, I would never fall for a romance scam, but we'll get into it a little bit more as to why they can actually be a little more difficult to detect. Fake prize scams. So these will claim that you won the lottery or sweepstakes or a gift card. And then they'll say, but we need you to pay taxes before awarding you the prize. Or there's a fee, a small fee associated. And so we need your account information. So you should always be aware of those types of things when you receive a message related to fake prizes. Investment scams. So those will trick you into investing money and promise that they will guarantee returns. Government imposter. So that is using the IRS or the Social Security Administration, law enforcement, or other government entities to threaten you. So the scammer will pretend to be from the government entity to try to trick you into giving your personal information or your funds. Generally, government entities are going to provide resources on their website around the types of fraud that they're seeing specific to that entity. So, for example, during tax season, be sure to check out the IRS tips on things to watch for because they do see a significant amount of fraud in the various agencies. And so they'll point out the specific things that they're seeing that consumers should be aware of. Impersonation scams. So we're going to go into these a little deeper too, where the scammer pretends to be someone you trust. So again, in regards to the online information sharing, we're posting pictures of ourselves or videos, podcasts, all types of things. All of that information can and likely will be used against you at some point. And so all of those resources we are making available for scammers to use for impersonation. Job offer scams, I'll show you an example of this shortly, but essentially you'll receive a fraudulent job offer and then they'll use information that you provide to steal your identity, tap into your finances, etc. Fake distress. So this is a generality, I would say. The scammers will use fake distress in a variety of different types of frauds to really force you into making a quick decision. So they will use severe and urgent financial need of a close friend or family member. They will try to pull at your heartstrings. All of the things that you can possibly think of that they would do to really force you into a situation is what they will do with fake distress. And then payment app fraud, scams using the various payment apps to access your money. I'm sure you've heard of a variety of different types of payment app scams, whether that's, you purchased basketball tickets from someone and went to pay them on Venmo and then never received the actual tickets. So there's a variety of different types of payment app fraud, but things that you should definitely be aware of in your personal life if you use those apps, and then also in the business world. So to dive in a little bit further on text message and social media fraud trends, so there are a variety of different trends that are just specific to text messaging and social media. You may have received some of these. Many of them are very popular. Package delivery issues. If you haven't received one of those, I would be surprised. I'll show you what those are. A bank account. So you receive a text message from whom you think is your bank, claiming that there's been a change to your account and you need to approve it. Or a fake fraud alert that appears to be from your bank. So as the Iowa Bankers Association, we always encourage you, if you receive something from your bank, just call them to verify that it is indeed accurate rather than responding or clicking on a link through a text message. Romance scams. So these come in text and message form. So you receive a message from someone you don't know. Oftentimes that can be online through social media. But I will also show you an example of a text message that I personally received. That was the beginning of a romance scam. And then that turns into frequent interaction to develop a relationship with you. And then investment pig butchering scams. So essentially what these are is a scammer will use text message or social media to develop their relationship, and then they'll make repeated requests or suggestions for investments and money. So essentially why they call it pig butchering is because they will butter you up and then they'll butcher you and take your money. So a horrible, horrible term, but that is what that means and why they call it that. And then marketplace sales. So for those of you that shop on social media marketplaces, you may have seen that someone you know is selling something, or a very popular one that I've seen on many of my friends' walls is they'll post that they're selling items from a family member's estate. And if you're interested in any of these items, send me a message. And oftentimes, if you message, it will seem like it's the person you know. Um, but if you ask them a few questions about how they know you, and really dig into it a little bit further, you'll find that their account has been compromised and it is indeed not the person. So again, pick up the phone and actually call that person to be sure before you engage in those different types of marketplace sales. We've also seen examples of when Taylor Swift was in the area, cheap Taylor Swift tickets on sale, where people were paying hundreds of dollars for the cheaper ticket that they then never received. Also, when it's around Christmas time, you'll see very popular name brands that seem to look like the actual brand selling things for a very discounted price. And then realize once you get the order confirmation that it isn't in fact the actual retailer. So just be very cautious. And like I said, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So take the time to slow down and really spend the time being sure that what you're purchasing, the information you're giving out, etc., is valid. And then toll related scams, which this is always funny to me because if you live in Iowa, you know that we do not have tolls here. But in relation to businesses, many business people travel out of state. And we've all been through tolls in other states where we just breeze through and think, okay, well, eventually I'm going to have to pay that. I'm not exactly sure how. Sometimes it comes through email, sometimes phone, sometimes you have to go online to pay. So be very cautious when it comes to toll related scams. So I'm going to take a minute here to show you some examples. So these are toll notices, both of which I received personally. So you'll see here that the initial interaction was, your vehicle has an unpaid toll that's past due. Please pay the due amount immediately to avoid late fees and suspension of your registration, with this crazy link below it that I, of course, did not click on. Then I receive a final notice that says if it's not paid, legal collection proceedings and negative impact on your credit score, to avoid enforcement and further penalties, pay here. Well, you'll notice that this one, they tried to get a little more tricky with the Iowa tolls j.top/gov. So they added the gov to try to trick me into thinking that it was actually the government, and then added my state to be specific to where I live. But like I said, if you're an Iowan, you know that we don't have tolls in Iowa, so it seems fishy anyway. But you could see where this would work in different states where there are indeed tolls. So this is the romance scam start that I mentioned to you. And our CEO, Adam Gregg, who we're going to use an example that he created later on in the presentation, but he actually received one that was even better than "Can we have dinner tonight?" His was specific to, for those of you that know him, he likes to play golf. And so this was, can we get together to play golf sometime? And so these can get really sophisticated. It was great to see you the other weekend. Can we get together for dinner? And you could see where this would happen to older, younger, any age person really, you're out for dinner or you're at an event over the weekend and you meet some people and you might not have their number. And then you receive this and think, oh gosh, was that Joe that I met at the dinner? Was that Susan? And then it goes from here, right? So if you start responding to this text message, pretty soon it's you've developed a relationship with this person. And these will go on for months and months until they can get you in a position where they can take advantage of you. So be very cautious. I know it's easy to say, oh, I would never fall for that. But it happens and it happens quickly. And once the ball is rolling, it's hard to roll the ball back. So just be very cautious with romance scams. And then you'll see here a schmishing message from a bank in Iowa, UBI of Iowa alerts. Here's a 765 debit charge that was made from CBS Online. If you don't recognize it, visit this to stop payment. I will say this one is pretty bad, pretty obvious that it's not a legitimate message. But what I will say is the sophistication nowadays, AI to check grammar, helping make sure that there's no errors throughout so that it looks more legitimate, has made it so you have to be even more cautious. And then this is one of the job offer. I actually just received this a couple days ago. So this was a recruiter. We came across your profile. We're looking for people, daily salary from 201 to 3,000 a day. Wow, that's great. You can receive your commission immediately, all payments on the same day. If you want to join us, just contact us here. So this is exactly what we define as job offer fraud. So pay attention to these types of things. Again, this falls under the if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. This was another one that was sent to us actually by one of our members who had seen this occur in their area. And what this is essentially it's an Amazon package that a fraudster will send to you claiming that you've purchased this specific item. So in this case, I think it was a pair of leggings or something of the sort. And so then you receive a text message that says your package has been delivered, your account will be charged accordingly. If this is not yours and you need to return it, scan the QR code on the front and to process your return. Well, the QR code is a phishing code essentially. And if you click on it or open that link, that's when all the malware starts to happen. So, very clever and an actual physical item mixed in with text message. So you could see where a business and or a individual might receive this and think, oh gosh, I don't want to be charged for this item. I didn't even order it. Seems pretty easy. I'll just click on the QR code and make the return. Which again, that's where you subject yourself and devices to malware. So just being very, very cautious. And like I said, they are just more and more sophisticated all the time. And Chris is really going to go into cyber fraud and all the different tools that are now being used to make this fraud even more sophisticated. So now I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Well, Jenica, thank you so very much. I kept wanting to cheer as you were hitting some of the topics that I'm going to help reinforce. But absolutely, folks, and with 85% of the audience either knowing someone or having experienced some of this themselves, you know that boy, is it rampant nowadays. So great time to be presenting on this. On one quick administrative note, please read the slides as I present today, as the definitions and content you'll see there will help kind of frame my commentary. You've already heard about many current threat trends, obviously, from Jenica, and these are all examples of cyber fraud. It's worth noting that even though many of these attacks occur on mobile devices, that with the transition from traditional landline phones to IP-based phone services, all of these attacks are in the cyber realm. But remember this, regardless of method, regardless of how you receive it, whatever the source is or the target, all of these attacks at their root are geared towards gaining inappropriate access to your resources. And that's what we're going to try and help you defend against. So over the next few slides, we'll look a little deeper into how AI is changing the cyber threat landscape. And I don't know that I can click next slide. Jenica, is it possible? Thank you so much. So Jenica just provided sample text messages that might leave you asking, is this really from a toll authority? Increasing business email compromises, though, have business owners and employees asking, is this really from our trusted partner or vendor? Over the past 18 months here at the association, we've seen a significant rise in attackers compromising vendors or partners. And then that compromised email platform is then used to steal credentials or to inject malware in messages that are sent to their contacts. And where that gets very complex and tricky is that let's say Microsoft 365 Exchange Online, for example, has a legitimate secure email function. So you would receive an email normally sent in this attack method as a secure message that will bypass most common phishing email filters. So you have a higher probability that you're going to receive this malicious email. Once you receive it, it'll say, hey, I've got an invoice or I've got a secure message. I've got something that you need to see. Log in here to open the message. It may take you to a fake login screen, which in turn captures your credentials as you attempt to log in, or it may simply have a link that you click on. When you click that link, it actually in the background will inject or attempt to inject malware onto your system. So as Jenica mentioned, email is still hands down the biggest attack vector there is out there. So always be wary in reading messages. More on this in just a moment, and we're going to hop to our next slide. So AI is absolutely supercharging all traditional schemes and making them more effective. From natural disaster assistance to romance scams to unpaid toll scams, if you can think of a current event or exploitable life circumstance, fraudsters are unfortunately likely there. In addition to emails and SMS messages, AI is used in the following manners. We're going to illustrate that a little bit later in the presentation to create false documents. So they can make photographs, diplomas, other items that appear incredibly legitimate. More on why they do that here in just a bit. Deepfake media, this is probably one of the most surprising to me. One of the most high profile examples of this would be, I want to say Elon Musk and some other celebrity were deepfaked actually, seen endorsing a cryptocurrency scam. And, for many folks out there who are new to the technology, it's an evolving technology, they may be swayed by the voice of someone who they see as trusted, reliable, or knowledgeable. And these videos that are being made are ridiculously, surprisingly realistic. More to follow. But the takeaway here on this slide is that last line. Is that AI has made all cybercrime much more sophisticated. And in addition to the crime itself being more sophisticated, the attackers are becoming much more brazen. This year, scammers are using AI intelligence, whether it is written messages, spoofing someone's writing style, or whether it's voice impersonation. They're using that to impersonate senior U.S. officials. And it's so prevalent that it prompted the FBI to release a warning just last quarter. Let's talk a little bit more, though, on the next slide about AI-enabled phishing. We could get a click. Jenica, is it possible to go to the next slide, or maybe I'm locked up? Tell you what we can do. Let me see if I can't just screen share. Thanks so much for your patience as we overcome this technical difficulty. Jenica, are you able to click or am I frozen? Oh, we're here. AI-enabled phishing. Perfect. So while spear phishing or custom email attacks have always been possible, they required time. time to research your target, time for planning how to attack and how to manipulate, time for crafting all the emails that would be involved to specifically appeal to that person and maybe to spoof a style of someone that they trusted. AI has enabled and accelerated this on a massive scale. Gone, as Jenica mentioned, are the misspellings and poor grammar that helped users spot many of the phishing emails previously. I think in one of her examples, you saw the word recognize spelled in the European fashion with an S and not a Z. Dead giveaway. Don't expect a lot of those in your more common, more complex phishing emails. And not only can AI write with the skill of an English professor, as I alluded to, it can mimic the writing styles of a particular target if they just have a sample, find a sample online of a post you made in social media. They can learn to mimic your writing style even. Kind of spooky. Even more fuel on the fire is that barriers to entry for criminals are also getting lower as AI becomes cheaper to access and less equipment is required to host it. According to the last Cisco Talos report that I read, the most impersonated entities of 2024 were Microsoft Outlook. See your fake login messages to capture your credentials there. Itself, Microsoft Outlook itself accounted for 25% of the total, along with LinkedIn, Amazon, PayPal, Apple, and oddly enough, Shein, the fast fashion company, was also in the top segment of the list there as spoofed emails. We're going to move to the next slide. And I don't want to give you all bad news. I want to try and give you a little bit of good news as to, in this case, how to help counter this better, harder to spot AI-enabled phishing. So, and while no two businesses will face exactly the same threats because risks and risk tolerances will vary from one organization to another and result in different information security postures, different tools, different capabilities at each business, these tips that we're presenting now will help ensure a more secure footing for almost any organization. So we're going to start at the top of the list, and that it's just a truism with any project you're trying to do. If leadership isn't on board, if it doesn't support and believe in the approach, it's highly likely to fail. So make sure most senior business leaders now understand the importance of cybersecurity. If any information can be provided to help legitimize the threat, happy to help in that regard. Misconfigurations of security environments, let's say your firewall, your email servers, protocols, and unpatched applications are open invitations for exploitation. Make sure that you're up to date and that your IT staff is trained and has a routine and followed patching cadence. So if data travels securely encrypted, regardless of its origin and destination, it's far less likely to be intercepted and or manipulated. If you've got employees or if you yourself as a business owner happen to frequent locations where you utilize public Wi-Fi, make sure that you're utilizing a VPN. Try not to send any traffic over the open, just connecting to a hotspot in a restaurant or a coffee shop. Attackers are known for stalking those areas to intercept information, and they harvest it there. Personal devices. All the employees that travel, a lot of folks work from home. Some people utilize their personal devices more and more in the course of their business lives. But unfortunately, the personal devices are often unmanaged and host any number of third-party applications not related to work. So they may find that those applications they downloaded for vacation photo sharing can mine data or provide backdoors for any information stored on that device. Avoid personal device use for business purposes whenever possible. And also, when you're thinking about your own business security posture, assume a successful phishing attack. Ask yourself, what then? What layers do I have in place for defense? And role play out a little bit. It doesn't take long to find out that if a phishing attack is successful, where you might have the next layer of vulnerability. The good news is also there are a lot of tools out there to help mitigate any kind of weaknesses you might find after that first line of defense. And lastly, employees will almost always be your weakest link. Phishing emails are still the easiest way for criminals to get into your environment. Invest time in teaching them effectively. Don't just use a stick. Please also remember the carrot. Incentivize good performance on cybersecurity testing, for example. And next slide, please. it is. Looks like we're there. Countering AI and phishing. There we go. Now we're going to talk about synthetic identity theft. And this happens, you may see this if your business happens to do any lending or receives applications for credit or things of that nature. Synthetic identity theft is characterized by a creation of completely fabricated identity using a mix of real and fake personal information. It often combines, say, a valid social security number with made-up names, dates of birth, and addresses, and other details, making it difficult to detect as the identity appears partially legitimate. Maybe they have a little inaccuracy here or there, but it is actually entirely fraudulent. And in addition to a blend of legitimate and illegitimate data, the fraudsters nowadays will often rely on targeting more vulnerable populations of society, like teenagers and the elderly, because they're less likely to have credit monitoring. Fraudsters will even take time to establish a credit history by opening small accounts with this fake identity and making timely payments to make the synthetic identity appear even more legitimate. Why? Well, it's either used fraud for profit, fraud for potential property, a car, a home, but they're used for a variety of illegal activities and ultimately have a negative impact on any individual who has a data overlap with the synthetic identity. Getting spooky, folks. All right, we'll move to our next slide. And this is the one that I find most amazing. Voice and video cloning are commonly used to trick individuals into releasing sensitive information or dispersing funds. Last quarter of 2024, read an article about I believe it was BMW, where they caught it, but it would have been a multi-million-dollar funds transfer that was actually initiated and a long way through the process for approval before someone realized that the initiator, the supposed initiator, didn't even know about the transaction. But they were able to clone this individual to such a convincing degree, they almost had a substantial payout. It can be used on a larger scale to direct investments or sway public opinion. We're entering an age where even those with perfect vision, not one of those, will wonder if they can actually believe their eyes. There are literally dozens of online options out there to use AI or artificial intelligence engines to create your own clone. So criminals have no shortage of tools to create remarkably realistic video copies of you to serve their purposes. But the best defense against this is to limit your online presence, which could include your Facebook vacation posts, your YouTube videos. Even your voicemail greeting could be used to clone your voice. And when you think about all the ways that we embrace social media in our life to share, to connect with colleagues, friends, family, you can see how difficult it could be to completely eliminate the risk. But just being aware of the possibility of cloning should keep your suspicion high, especially remember when you're asked to do something uncommon that is motivated by emotion. So for some frightening insight into just how easy it is to voice clone, I'm going to hand it back over to Jenica for some examples.
Thank you, Chris. So we're going to go through some examples here. And as Chris said, it is a little frightening to know what can be done with the tools that we now have in relation to AI and impersonation and deepfake and all of those things. So I wanted to start with an example, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I would encourage you to take a look at this article that was published in the Wall Street Journal. Essentially, scammers used impersonation tools to develop a panicked voice on the phone that they then used to call a mom that sounded like her daughter, saying that she had been abducted to get her back. They needed a certain amount of money. There was drugs involved in this particular example. And essentially the mom went along with it because she thought it was indeed her daughter on the other line. And thousands of dollars lost, and a phone call after the fact to her daughter confirmed that her daughter had no idea that this was happening, and was not involved in any sort of way, not injured, not hurt, nothing. So again, I will tell you, always, always verify. And we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of a family code word as we get into resources. But that is a key thing that you can implement to try to combat the voice impersonation. But with that, we're going to go through a little example here. So as I mentioned, our president and CEO, Adam Gregg, used AI tools to clone his daughter's voice. And so we're going to take you through a scenario here. And the first is him just recording his daughter to get just her normal voice. So we're going to start with that, and then we'll kind of go through the series here.
My name is Lauren Gregg, and I'm helping my dad with a presentation. He's gonna use this recording to clone my voice using AI.
Okay, so that was video of Sweet Lauren just giving a little bit that Adam could then use to put into AI to use to voice clone. So in this case, we're using text to voice for AI.
Hi, this is Lauren. My dad is Adam Gregg with the Iowa Bankers Association. I'm helping him show you how easy it is to trick you using AI.
So pretty good. And that was just one tool, only took him a couple minutes. So now Adam wanted to see if he could get AI to make Lauren sound a little more in distress. And so to do that, he recorded his own voice acting to guide the AI.
Hi, this
Dad, there's someone here. They came into the house and told me to call you and said they're going to hurt me unless you pay them a lot of money.
So a little cringy, right? But bear with us, because then using AI tools, Adam was able to use that audio voice acting to guide AI to then use Lauren's voice to sound in distress.
Dad,
there's someone here. They came into the house and told me to call you, and they said they're gonna hurt me unless you pay them a lot of money.
So just think if you received a call and it sounded similar to your child, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to be in total distress. And if it sounds anything like your child, you're likely going to react. Similar to grandparent scams, you know, we hear this happening all the time where elderly will receive a call and think it's their grandchild. And of course, they want to react. But this whole series took Adam maybe 10 minutes to put together. So you think fraudsters can do this and are professionals at this? They can make it seem so realistic that it really is hard to tell. And so we're going to now turn to some resources. We'll quit trying to scare you and give you some tips to protect yourself. And we're going to start with this kind of fun video that talks about if someone asks for your account information.
The kind of girl I can share a joint checking account with.
Oh, okay.
I have to ask, what's your PIN?
Wait, what?
You can trust me. I work at your bank.
Banks never ask that. I'm out. What a scam.
Yeah, I've seen it all. Wait, before you leave, click this link.
Give me his ravioli to go. And the breadsticks too.
So that is a perfect combination of a number of different scams that we see, especially in the banking industry. But why I wanted to show you that is because our national association, American Bankers Association, they have a foundation that is focusing on fraud, and their Banks Never Ask That campaign has a number of resources available on their website for free to educate consumers. One of which is a quiz that you can take, your family members can take, employees can take, to see if you can recognize fraud and to know what to look for. So I would encourage you to use those resources. They are very beneficial. We use them a lot here at the association, and bankers around the state use them as well. But they are very useful and free to use. So we encourage you to do that. As I mentioned before, creating a secret word or phrase with family members so you can easily verify that it's you is the key. As you saw in the previous slides, it's very easy to take a video, to take voice, and to turn it into something that it might not actually be. And it can be really difficult to detect those things. And you might say, well, my voice isn't out there for anyone to hear. Well, if you've ever posted a video on your social media, if you've ever done an interview, if you have ever been part of a meeting or a presentation like this, your voice is likely out there and can be used. So be very careful about what you're putting online. Don't be naive to the tactics that they can use and the sophistication that's being used. And the code word should be something, for example, like butterscotch or your favorite sports team, but don't make it something that could be easily guessed. So maybe not your mother's maiden name, because that information could be found on social media. Maybe not even your favorite sports team, because that could be found on social media if you're a frequent goer. So choose something that's a little different that only your family would remember. Share it with your grandparents, share it with your kids, share it with your aunts and uncles, so that if they ever do get a call claiming that it's someone within your family, it's a quick, what's the secret word or code word? If they don't know it, you know it's a scam. Again, I could say this until I'm blue in the face, but trust your gut. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Always, always verify. So always check to be sure you're not falling for a scam. Hang up and call the person's known number directly. Check with your bank before clicking. Please, please, please check with your bank before clicking. And limit your online content if you can, because anything you put online will be used for impersonation or deepfake media. And one additional thing you can do is add a trusted contact to your account that the bank could contact if they suspect fraudulent activity.
The kind of girl.
So tips to protect yourself, your family, and your business. We talked a lot today about cyber. So watch for social engineering. This is how scammers are manipulating their victims. Regardless of the scam, there are some telltale signs to watch for: the pressure to act quickly, the urgency, the sensitive information, the unusual requests from authority figures, unexpected attachments. They're going to try to exploit your emotions. So they will learn as much about you as they possibly can and catch you in a weak moment, and try to use threats or other requirements to get you to do what they're wanting you to do and to keep it private. We hear all the time where customers will come into a bank holding a phone and say, I can't say anything because they can hear me on the other line. With Bitcoin ATM fraud, that's a lot of times what's happening. They say, don't tell anyone, stay on the line with me. I know exactly where you are, things like that. And so that's scary. That's very scary to people. So just know that that is likely a scam, and you can remove yourself from that situation with no consequence. Trust your local banker. So again, Chris and I are with the Iowa Bankers Association. We represent nearly 260 banks here in the state. 97% of Iowa banks are our members. And if you think it might be a scam or fraud, call your bank and ask them. The banking industry is doing more than any other industry to fight fraud, and to try to educate consumers. And they see fraud every single day. They know what to look for. They can help you investigate the fact pattern. They can help you protect your accounts and your finances. And don't be afraid to say something. I know that we talked a little bit at the beginning of people are afraid to report. There's a stigma around falling for fraud. if you fall victim, the quicker you contact the bank, the better. The quicker you report it, the better. So be sure to act quickly. Don't be afraid to say something. Don't be embarrassed. It happens to so many people. And as we mentioned, the sophistication makes it even more difficult to detect. And what can you do? We always encourage that you educate, educate, educate. So educate yourselves, educate your businesses, educate employees. As Chris mentioned, don't just use a stick, have a carrot too. The best way to prevent fraud is to educate. We find so many times that once you're into a scam, what I mentioned earlier is once the ball's rolling, it's hard to roll it back. Once you're involved, it can be really difficult to get out of. And the mindset, it's hard to convince people that they're involved in a scam once they're knee deep into it. So the more that we can educate on the front end to avoid getting into that situation, the better. Watch for fraud and talk about the fraud you see. So, for example, when I get text messages that are fraud related or I hear of things happening, I share them with my team, I share them with my family. So, do those things and try to help protect others, raise awareness, reduce the stigma, and report fraud to your banker, to the CFTC, and then to the FDI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. Here are also a number of available resources to combat fraud. So if you're wondering, where do I start to educate employees? All of these resources are free and they're all fantastic. So go ahead, go out on the website, any of these websites, and use these fraud resources to educate your families, your employees, businesses, etc. So with that, I will turn it back over to Ashley for any questions that you have. And if Chris and I can't answer your question, we can certainly look into it and get back to you with an answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janika and Chris. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get started with the Q&A here. We have a question already. Can they capture your voice when you talk through your TV remote?
They absolutely can. It all depends on what is breached. We live in a wonderfully convenient world. They call it the Internet of Things. I can go home, I can tell my particular internet device of choice who listens to my voice and every other sound in my house, out of, they say, convenience. I can ask the internet device to turn up the temperature or to play music or to share a notification. But if that device has been compromised, every bit of information that transacts through that device can indeed be intercepted. So it's a trade-off between your own security and your own convenience. Always remember, though, that we almost all of us carry around a listening device in our pockets that can be always on. Those end user agreements that when you click on an app to download and say, hey, I agree to the terms and conditions. Heck, I just want this golf score keeper app. That's all I want. Just download it. Yes, I agree to everything. You could have just agreed to allow that app to ship who knows what data that your phone collects on you off to the manufacturers of that application or to people who license the data coming from that application. So we're in a different world, but always be wary.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Can you share the PowerPoint?
We absolutely will. We have plans to distribute that. And the only thing we need are the attendees' email addresses, which I believe, Ashley, you are in the process of collecting for us.
Yep, I got that. Thank you. Yeah, I can send out the we can send out the recording and slides. I just wanted to make sure it was cool with you to do the slides as well, so thank you. When someone has been scammed, what should they do? Are there places that it should be reported other than the bank to try to stop payment?
Absolutely. Jenica listed there, when we get the slides out, you'll be able to see several sources. Depending on the type of scam and how the individual is compromised. If it's a business, absolutely. Even individuals are encouraged to report through the IC3, which is the Internet Crime Complaint Center. It's actually operated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Two reasons you want to report at least through that, including local law enforcement if they have the capability to address it. But the reason you want to report to the IC3 is twofold. Number one, you get the the information out there, and they may be able to act on your business's behalf, for example. But as Jenica mentioned, time is of the essence. The quicker you report, there is no guarantee that you could get funds back if you inadvertently discovered a funds transfer. There's no guarantee you could get it back, but there is a strong correlation between the timeliness in which you make that report and the ability to get it back. Some banks, we've actually had an instance where we helped a compromised partner quickly notify a bank that a funds transfer had taken place. The bank was already watching that account. They were able to pause it long enough for their investigation to come to fruition and actually stop that transaction, because what the fraudsters do is they establish an account to transfer money into, and then they establish another account to then transfer the money that hits that first account into, and typically that second account is offshore, and then it's gone. So yes, the quicker you report it, and the second reason to report it to the IC3 is the FBI aggregates all this data. So even if they can't address your particular instance, your fraud directly, what they can do is realize that it's not just happened to you, it's happened to 6 other businesses of your ilk in your region, and then they can dedicate resources to addressing what is now a larger issue. And it helps them to target their resources more effectively. So please do report.
And just to add on to that, one of the reasons why, well, a couple of reasons why we encourage you to contact your bank is bankers are part of the Iowa Fraud Alliance, Anti-Fraud Alliance. And so we partner with law enforcement across the state. We partner with the Department of Public Safety, the Iowa Attorney General, and others that work for various agencies to combat fraud. And so a lot of times, if the banker can't help you, we know who to contact that can quickly, because that's the complaint that we get most often is I report it into some queue and never hear anything about recovering any of my finances. So I would for sure reach out to wherever you have your accounts as the initial starting point and go from there. It's also important to do some work on the front end. Specifically if you're a business owner, but also personally, be sure you understand and know what products and services slash anti-fraud, fraud protection that your bank might offer, and be sure that you're using those. We don't cover those in this presentation just because banks offer a variety of different products and services, but be sure that you're aware of what those are. And what your bank can offer to protect you on the front end, so that you don't have to put yourself in a situation where you're looking to resolve.
Awesome. Thank you both for all of that information. And yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the Iowa Attorney General's office, because that is another one that people can report to as well. And I will send a link to that in the follow-up email too. Are we able to report fraud to our local law enforcement for a customer that doesn't believe they're being scammed?
Boy, is that a great question. It depends, I guess, and I know I hate answering a question that way. I would absolutely try, and the reason I say that is because they're limited in what they can do if the person doesn't believe they're being scammed in many instances, and they're also, it depends on the locality. Some law enforcement departments have a lot more resources, may have task forces that are specifically geared to being able to respond to this type of event. But I'll share a personal example. My mother fell victim to a sweepstakes scam in a small town in North Carolina. And we were in contact with the local law enforcement, and they were very limited in what they could do. They paid an assistance visit to her. But unfortunately, when people are approached, especially in these long play scams, where they bilk them out of repeatedly out of large sums of money, they have so well rehearsed what they know the police or law enforcement is going to say, that they have already said, you can't speak to law enforcement. They're going to try and stop you from getting these winnings. They've already prepped the victim to a degree, as Jenica mentioned, to be third party adverse. That any contact they have outside of the channel between the fraudster and the individual being conned is detrimental to that person, the conned person's overall goals. It's very, very difficult. Yes, yeah, you should report it, but I wish I could say that you're guaranteed better luck. Unfortunately, you're not.
And I would say too, Ashley, not knowing exactly where the question's coming from, if you are a business of some type, you should of course follow any policies, procedures, rules, regulations that you have around privacy of
Absolutely.
consumer information. But that said, like this should be something that you're talking about and that you are aware of if you feel that someone is in this situation. How do we move forward?
Jenica, would it be of value? You mentioned establishing a trusted person also on an account, for example. Maybe if you were to reach out to, you believe there's fraud going on, maybe law enforcement could link up with that trusted individual. Many avenues out there, nothing's guaranteed, unfortunately.
Great, thank you both. We have a few more minutes if anyone has any last minute questions that they'd like to ask. The chat is still open for you. But in the meantime, I've added links to the Iowa Bankers Association's website, specifically a webpage that has some like fraud resources on there. And then I added a link to the webinar feedback survey. That just helps us kind of like know how your experience was today. And it's helpful for us like planning moving forward and to get that information. But yeah, we have a couple more minutes if anyone has any other questions. I guess in the meantime, one that I thought of when you were presenting, you mentioned a fact pattern. Can you kind of dive into like what that is briefly? And then it looks like we have another question too.
Sorry, Ashley, was that for me or Jenica?
Whoever would like to answer. Yeah, either way.
So I'm guessing that you're referring to the section on banks understand fact patterns. So that's going to be specific on the type of fraud, right? So examples would be how I showed you the initial text message on the romance scam. So what happens next? If I were to respond to that, then I start to receive more messages, and then maybe they're asking for a phone call instead so that they can get my voice. And then maybe from there it's, hey, I had a family emergency. Can you send me $100? And then maybe the next time it's 1,000, and then the next time it's 2,000. It just kind of depends on the specific type of fraud, what the fact pattern is. But what I will say is that fraud is so prevalent, specifically financial fraud, that we see it all the time. Bankers see it constantly. And there are trends in specific areas, right? So the county may have seen, oh, we saw check fraud at this bank, and then we also saw the same type of fraud at this bank and this bank. And so oftentimes the banks are communicating as to what they are seeing across that specific side of the state. And like I said, our Anti-Fraud Alliance as well works on multiple cases between the division and the Attorney General and the Department of Public Safety and the FBI and all of them. They're all working on different fact patterns that are occurring with fraud. And so that hopefully that helps to answer your question.
Yes, thank you. It's just like the terminology. I think it's good to know like more what it means. Thanks. We have one more two more, but I can type an answer to one. There's one more if we have time. If not, it's okay.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. The trusted contact suggestion opens up a lot of questions about privacy issues for banks. Do you have an answer to that concern?
I would say if you are a banker that's asking the question, reach out to the IBA compliance team. Because yes, we have a whole process around the trusted contact.
Absolutely. And Ashley, on that other question about how often would it be a good idea to do this again, as so much changes in a short amount of time, boy, is that the truth. It's a never-ending game of leapfrog. We identify a type of fraud, put out information as to how to have folks avoid being victims by identifying it, defenses you can put in place, and by golly, the bad guys change their game. and it's a new type of attack or it's a new strategy. So it is an ever-evolving game of leapfrog. I think one of the best things we can do is provide links to resource pages on fraud, because those entities, whether it's the FBI, whether it's the ABA, whether it's the AARP, they always are updating, they're researching, they're collecting data on what happens to their members, how they're impacted, they're receiving fraud reports. So their knowledge is really up to date. And I think linking you to those resources is a great first step, because you're going to find the freshest stuff there first.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's a great point, Chris. And I will definitely include those in the follow-up email as well. And in the meantime, everyone can take a look at that website from the IBA that I've linked in the chat too, that has some of those resources. Okay, so that wraps us up for today. So we just want to thank Jenica and Chris again for your time and for sharing all of that really helpful knowledge with us. And I want to thank everyone again for joining us, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Take care.